Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be taking a look at my team selection ahead of game week 35, whether or not I want to go conservative or have a bit of fun and play it aggressive for the remainder of the season, and a really close debate on who the best captaincy is for game week 35. Okay then, so before we get on to my team selection ahead of the next game week, a quick look back at how game week 34 rounded off. Obviously, we had the Thursday fixture that I was waiting for before locking in what my score was on the free hit. It was 79 points, which again, much like my other chips this season, was a little bit of a disappointment. It was still a green arrow and still up about 40k places, but it wasn't the season defining free hit that I really needed it to be. And I missed out on a couple of the big hitters like Trippier, like Sessegnon, like Jose Sarr as well. And if I had even one or two of those, then this could have been completely different. And I might have even still been in with a shout of top 100k. However, I didn't get that. So 79 points. It's a green arrow just outside top 300k. My season's kind of going nowhere at this point. And as I keep mentioning, no one's really watching these videos hoping that I'm going to get top 100 or top 10k. But I am still trying to help you out and also maybe just have a little bit more fun with FPL before the end of the season. A quick round off. Mbermo blanked last night, unfortunately. And although he kept the clean sheet, he did get a yellow card. Obviously frustrating because I did include him in my free hit. But maybe that puts off a few people from buying him in ahead of game week 35 or captaining him against Man United. So we'll come on to that a little bit later on. I've done a bit of a summary already in my previous video on the rest of my free hit. It's not a bad performance, but like I said, it's not blockbuster. It's not season defining. So I don't want to dwell on it too much. This video is more about how we move forwards rather than look back. So to summarize, 79 points, up about 40k places, a blank from Mbermo last night, and overall a bit of a disappointment on the free hit. Do let me know how you scored in game week 34 in the comments below, especially if you were on a free hit. But also, if you weren't, were you able to keep pace with those of us who were? Right then, so on to my team as it currently stands without transfers going into game week 35. What I first notice here is actually it's not that badly set up, but there are a lot of eggs in very few baskets, which is a repercussion of the bench boost and, of course, the triple captain, all of that stuff before we went into the free hit. We were obviously setting up the team for that specific double game week, especially on the bench boost. But because we were on a wild card very recently as well, we were throwing a lot of weight behind very specific teams and specific fixtures. So it has left me with triple Crystal Palace at home to Nottingham Forest. I do have triple Newcastle away at Brighton, although I'm benching Livramento at the moment. And I've got triple Arsenal at home to Bournemouth as well. Now, overall, on paper, it doesn't look too bad. There's a lot of home fixtures there, and none of them are really poor matchups, but I don't love any of them either. So we'll start off with Arsenal against Bournemouth. Triple up seems like a bit much, especially considering they've got a huge second leg against PSG coming in the midweek. I think Bukayo Saka is almost a certain transfer out for me. I'll come on to my transfers in just a moment's time, but to no one's surprise, he will be probably the one that goes. Bournemouth at home is an okay fixture, but I think he probably gets rested. He played 90 against PSG. I don't think the fitness concerns are a problem anymore, but if you've got a talismanic player like him ahead of such an important fixture against PSG when they're still in the tie, and honestly, they're not really fighting for much in the Premier League at the moment, I think it's very unlikely that they take any unnecessary risks. So I think Saka, having a good deputy in Nwaneri, is likely to get rested. And even if he's not, I think he comes off early. So Saka's probably a transfer out for me, which would only give me double Arsenal against Bournemouth. And then Raya and Saliba, maybe there's a very slight risk that they get rotated. Less so with Raya because his deputy Neto is cup tied against Bournemouth because that's the parent club of Neto. And then Saliba, I think it's very unlikely he gets rested or rotated, but if he did, it's unlikely he comes off the bench. So that would mean that I could have a Milenkovic coming off my bench for Saliba without too much risk, which I could get on board with. It's not ideal considering I've got triple Palace, but I can make peace with it. Elsewhere, you start looking at Triple Palace at home to Forest. Forest's underlying defensive data has been quite poor recently in the last 10 game weeks, and since Christmas, it's really dropped off. I think they're 16th in the league overall for the defensive data since the turn of the year, which is a huge drop off from what we saw at the start. So I don't think it's a bad fixture to be attacking, but Palace not really fighting for too much in the league, whereas they do have an FA Cup final coming. Are they likely to bring players off early? Are they likely to have one eye on that fixture later on in the season? Possibly, but I don't think it's a bad fixture necessarily. It just means that maybe Triple Palace is possibly a little bit much. Obviously, Newcastle at home, away, to Brighton is not a bad fixture whatsoever right now. In terms of a lot of the statistics, people might suggest it's not an easy one. But Brighton, again, defensively haven't looked great recently. I think they've conceded 13 goals in 5 games now. And both Isak and Murphy, I'd expect decent returns from. The one thing there, though, is that Murphy does come off early. So can I get on board with 60 to 70 minutes of Murphy versus some of the other players I could be bringing in? I'll talk about it later on, but I think maybe there's an opportunity there because it wouldn't be crazy to suggest that 70 minutes of Murphy gets beaten by someone like a Bowen who will get almost certainly 90 minutes against Spurs. So that's just something to think about. Moving on to the final team, that being Man City at home to Wolves. Wolves have been in great form recently, but they have had some really nice fixtures. And Man City have seemingly found a little bit of a groove again. And Marmoush and Gvardiol are almost certain locks in my team for this game week. Possibly even an outsider captaincy call for Marmoush as well. So no free transfers made at the moment. My team on paper doesn't look too bad, but when you start digging, it relies quite heavily on a very specific set of fixtures and fixtures that I'm not massively confident on either. So maybe moves need to be made. Saka probably needs to go. So we'll start off with that. And obviously, I do currently have my captaincy on Salah, but I haven't really moved that since the deadline. So we do need to discuss who the best captaincy calls would be for this week, which we'll do in a later section too. So taking a look at my transfer plans, as it currently stands, I've got the padlock next to Saka to Mbeumo, which is currently unlocked, mainly just because I haven't actually made the move yet. But considering it's a Friday evening deadline and I'm recording this Friday morning, I do need to get on and make that move. I was waiting until the end of the Forest Brentford game just in case Mbeumo got injured. I think he's fine, so we can probably make that move fairly safely. And Mbeumo is a player I've talked about a lot in videos this week. I don't want to bore people to death because everyone's talking about him. But to summarize, 90 minutes on penalties, on some set pieces, great underlying attacking data, and against Man United, who will have one eye on the Europa League semi-final, although they are in a very good position. So I don't expect them to rotate too much in their Sunday fixture against Brentford. And the turnaround to the second leg is actually not too bad. They've got a bit of a gap. So they might rest and rotate a little bit, but I still expect them to be a decent side going into game week 35 with not too much rotation. And Mbeumo's still a great option though, and it's not just for this game week either. It's also for game week 36. It looks like a good fixture against Ipswich, and then it's not bad fixtures through to the end of the season either. It's more of a hygiene pick rather than anything else. And I think it just makes a lot of sense for me to get rid of Saka, who I don't think will start, for Mbeumo, who almost certainly does, gets 90 minutes, and saves me a lot of money to make future moves elsewhere. So that's a lock. And it all comes down to whether or not I want to maybe play a little bit more conservatively or logically towards the end of the season, or I start looking at having a bit more fun with it, because let's face it, 300k, my season's not really going anywhere of note. I'm very unlikely to get top 100k, but if I get something between 150 and 500k, what's really the difference? Why does it matter? Especially if my target was 100k in the first place. So yes, I would like the best rank possible, but considering it's very unlikely that I get to a rank that I really want to get to, I could just have a bit more fun with it and buy the players I want to get and give myself that excitement back between now and the end of the season. So I'm kind of torn between two paths, playing conservatively and reminding myself how to play the game logically, or I can maybe have a bit more fun with it. And that brings me on to the first -4 I could take, and that would be getting rid of Mateta at home to Nottingham Forest. and bringing in either Watkins or Wissa. Now, Watkins is on the graphic. I do still like him, and it was a player that I was looking at maybe buying at the start of this game week and maybe forcing the issue there a little bit. But as the week's gone on, I've gone off of it a little bit because I think he's a better transfer in come game week 37 than now. So do I think that a -4 is worth taking now to get in Watkins over Mateta? Now, Mateta's fixture this week against Forest isn't a bad one right now at time of recording, considering Forest have dropped off a little bit defensively. His minutes haven't been amazing, but I think in part that was due to the injury he was getting back from and the fact they had the FA Cup semi-final round the corner. They do have a little bit of a gap now towards the final, so I do think his minutes probably improve, but he might now be off of penalties considering he missed the most recent penalty in the semi-final of the FA Cup. So a lot going on there. And is it worth the upside of a -4 to get across to Watkins? I'm not sure it is this week, but I could get on board with bringing in Watkins in a couple of game weeks when his fixtures get a little bit better. He's got Spurs and Man United in the final 2 game weeks of the season. And Mateta's next 2 are Forest followed by Spurs, which again, 2 good fixtures right now on paper. And Spurs, although they're in a good position in the Europa League semi-final, it's 3-1. There's maybe a little bit more riding on the second leg and they go away. So I do wonder if they're going to rotate a little bit more after that semi-final is out of the way. Maybe they'll be tired legs. Maybe they'll want to conserve a bit of energy if they were to get through to the final. So that Spurs game in game week 36 is maybe something that I want to hold on to Mateta for. However, the final option I've got is bringing in Yoane Wissa. Now, I like that a lot more because he's got better fixtures on the surface for the next 2 game weeks. Man United and then Ipswich seems very competitive versus a Forest and a Spurs in terms of Mateta. Do I think it pays off a -4? I'm umming and ahhing on it. I do want Wissa, but if I'm not going to look at captaining him, is a -4 worthwhile when it is a very short-term move? Let's face it, all moves at this point are. And is it 4 points better than what Mateta can produce in the next 2 fixtures? I think if I were to make that move, it would be on the assumption that Mateta doesn't have penalties and maybe gets an early substitution in at least one of the next 2 games, whereas Wissa is very unlikely to do so. Wissa's data is better as well, but we know he's not on penalties, whereas Mateta, there's at least that chance he is. So there's a lot of factors pro and anti bringing in Wissa, but I think I'm more likely to make that move than bring in Watkins. It also saves me a bit of money as well, so it enables future moves. But I'm very on the fence about this one, so let me know whether or not you'd maybe just play it conservatively, leave it with Saka to Mbeumo, or you'd force the issue a little bit more, go aggressive, chase a little bit, have a bit of fun with bringing in a Watkins or more likely a Wissa. The second -4 that I've been looking at taking over the last 24 hours would be to remove Asensio on top of the Saka to Mbeumo move and bring in Jared Bowen. Now, Asensio on the surface looks like a great FPL asset. 0.95 XGI per 90 is fantastic. However, we need to add some context here because he doesn't get 90 minutes most matches. He's a significant risk to start, and he's had a couple of penalties recently, which massively bolsters the underlying attacking data. But he missed those penalties, so it's unlikely, probably, that he gets those penalties in the future, even if Aston Villa were to be awarded one. So Asensio, I think, is probably a player I can't rely on anymore. He's currently on my bench this game week, so taking the -4 would be basically placing a little bit of a bet that Bowen not only beats Asensio by 4 points, but also the player that I then bench to have Bowen then starting. Now, that player is currently one of Mateta, Sarr, or Murphy. So I'd have to make a decision as to which of those 3 is the best one to bench, and therefore Bowen would have to beat them by -4 to make it pay off. It doesn't necessarily have to be -4 paying off this week, though, because Bowen has a great set of fixtures between now and the end of the season, so it could pay off down the line, not necessarily just in this game week. I think at time of recording, I'm more likely to make this move than the previous -4 because Bowen at home to Spurs, who I do think rotate, because again, they've got a little bit more riding on that second leg. So I think they possibly don't really care about the West Ham fixture. I quite like that one. Then Bowen will play Man United. Man United might be a bit tired after their second leg in the Europa League. After that, it's Forest, who again defensively have dropped off significantly as of late. And then game week 38, it's Ipswich. So it's a great final game week for Bowen as well. So that stretch of four, it seems like it makes a lot of sense as a move. And he's a player that I do like the look of to start in every single game week between now and the end of the season. Whereas Asensio, I can't rely on. And I've got a midfield that's packed full of players that I'm not 100% confident on. So Sarr is a good option. But can I rely on him and his fixtures every single game week between now and the end of the season? Possibly, possibly not. And then Murphy is a great option, but Newcastle's fixtures, especially after this game week, don't look that great at all. I think it's Chelsea, then Arsenal. So do I want to start him, especially when he gets 60 to 70 minutes a match in those fixtures? Maybe not. So Bowen could be a good player to be bringing in, be a little bit more aggressive now, but the -4 hit might pay off down the line. So on to captaincy, which is a really key debate this week. There's not much in it between some of the top 10 options. I've included 6 here, but there's still a number of other options you might consider, like KDB, like Vardy even against Southampton. You could look at Eze, you could look at Palmer as well if you're still bullish on Chelsea and Palmer. But I think these are probably my preferred top 6. And Burmo is going to probably be the one that's most talked about or has been this week so far. The expected points are good against Man United, who haven't been great defensively this season. Although, as you can see here, their XGC per 90 over the last 10 game weeks has improved. So one to note. And Burmo has just played on the Thursday evening, as has Man United, by the way. But that could be something that weighs into your thinking. And Burmo will be a popular option, though. He's obviously a 90-minute man on penalties and good underlying attacking data. Isak is one that hasn't been talked about too much, but is certainly in the conversation. I actually really like it, and my captaincy could end up on him. Brighton away from home is not a bad fixture. Brighton do come at you and they do leave chances on the table for their opposition. Their XGC per 90 is the same as Man United's in the last 10 game weeks, but in the last 5, they've conceded 13 goals. So they have been quite leaky. And Newcastle have a lot to play for right now. They're on a Champions League charge and will be fully rested too. So I do quite like Isak as an option, and the underlying attacking data is fantastic, as is Mo Salah's. And Salah doesn't have the best fixture this week away at Chelsea, but never count him out. The data's phenomenal. And now they've won the league, I think it's basically stat padding for Salah, and he will still play 80, 90 minutes a match. Liverpool, towards the back end of the Spurs game, looked like their whole goal in life was to create chances for Mo Salah, because Salah is so driven by those personal awards now. He knows exactly what he needs to get to break all sorts of records. And that's not a bad thing either. He's obviously a player that's really motivated by those statistics. And if that drives him forwards, then fair play to him. I don't think that's a bad thing when it comes to him as a player or as an FPL asset. And you could see it in the back end of the Spurs game. He was shooting every time he had the chance to. He eventually got his reward. And I do kind of think that Chelsea's not a bad matchup for him either. Chelsea do like the ball. They do like playing high up and trying to pin teams back a little bit. And Liverpool also don't mind playing on the counter. So I do envisage a world where Chelsea play on the front foot, do have a lot of the ball, but then are countered on at pace by Liverpool. And there's no better team at doing that than Liverpool with Salah on the right wing, especially with Trent. If he's in the starting lineup, he can ping balls over the top at pace on the counter. And Salah is the perfect man to get in behind the Chelsea high line. So I do still like him as an option. Do not discount him. And he is actually ahead when it comes to the expected points via Fantasy Football Hub. After that, you've got the likes of Marmoush at home to Wolves. Haaland is getting close to being back, but probably won't be a factor this game week, which means that Marmoush is likely to be on penalties. Good underlying attacking data still. And Wolves have been in good form, but they've been up against easier sides. So it's not a captaincy candidate that I mind, but probably not where I'm going personally. Bowen at home to Spurs would be a pretty fun differential call. His data is the worst on this spreadsheet in terms of his attacking data, but the opponent's defensive data in the last 10 is the worst in terms of the 6 on screen at the moment as well. So it's a form versus fixture or a data versus fixture kind of matchup for Bowen. I really don't mind it if you're chasing. If you're going massively differential, I think he's very much in this conversation alongside all of the heavy hitters. And I do really like the fixture. So Bowen could be an option, but you're, I guess, favouring more how good the fixture is versus the data that he's been putting up recently. He does tick along really nicely though. 19 attacking returns is not bad whatsoever. And he is a player that maybe doesn't explode too often, but ticks along really nicely. So I don't mind it whatsoever. Finally, Ollie Watkins is another player that I really don't hate. His minutes will be bolstered by the fact that Rashford's out for the season. So I'd expect him to get 80 to 90 every single week now. Fulham's defensive data is not bad and they are a good side. So this is more a data matchup for Watkins. 0.64 XGI per 90 is good. And I think the fact he's only got 22 attacking returns this season, which by the way isn't bad, but it could have been so much more if we could have guaranteed his minutes earlier on in the season. He's had players jostling for his position. He's had Duran to compete with. Then it was Rashford. And I think if he'd been more secure in his minutes, these sort of numbers would look a lot more healthy. So I don't hate him as an outside captaincy candidate against Fulham. However, for me right now, I think it's between the top 3, Mbeumo, Isak and Salah, but it is going to go down to the wire. And honestly, there's no clear favourite here. So I would follow your gut. If you're chasing, I'd maybe favour differential. So maybe move away from your Salah, Isak or Mbeumo and go with someone else, because there's not much in it. But if you're playing a bit more secure and you're in a good position rank-wise, then any of the top 3, they'll all probably be very close to, if not above, 100% effective ownership. So you can't really go wrong with any of them. I've got a bit of a gut feeling on Salah, and it might sound boring because he's been a popular captaincy candidate all season long, but something's just telling me that that is a good matchup. Then again, Isak's is a good matchup as well, and Burmo's not bad either, so it could really go down to the wire. Right then, so wrapping up the video on my team as it currently stands, I haven't physically made the Saka to Mbeumo move, but it's going to happen straight after recording. So Mbeumo will come in for Saka, save me a bit of money. It would give me 2.7 million in the bank. And then it's down to whether or not I want to use that money now, go aggressive with either bringing in a Watkins possibly for a Mateta, a Bowen in for an Asensio, or I save even more money and take out Mateta for Wissa and really go heavy on the Brentford home fixture against Man United, followed, of course, then by Ipswich away from home. I think as it stands, I'm quite likely to take the -4 and go a little bit more aggressive. I do quite like the idea of taking out Asensio, righting that wrong, and bringing in Jared Bowen. But then it would be a question of who do I bench for Bowen? So the 3 candidates to bench would probably be Sarr, Murphy, or Mateta. Murphy's minutes aren't great, so I could bring him out of the starting lineup, but I don't mind the fixture against Brighton. Forest, I don't hate the fixture, but having triple Palace might seem like a little bit much. Sarr's data is actually really good and he does get good minutes, but has been frustrating in the league to say the least. And then Mateta, his minutes haven't been great, but he could have penalties and the minutes could arguably improve now that they've had their semi-final out of the way. So that would go down to the wire. I think right now I'm likely to take the -4, but at the very least, Mbeumo is in for free. And then if I were to take the -4, Asensio's gone. And then I'd probably take out, I think, Murphy ahead of anyone else. But again, that could really go down to the wire and bring in Bowen into my starting 11. Now, let me know how you're shaping up ahead of the deadline. I honestly don't have too much time to answer too many questions given I'm recording this on Friday morning, but if you do still want to leave a comment below, I'll try and get back to you before the Game Week 35 deadline. And of course, let me know what you would do in my position as well if you get the chance. In the meantime, leave a like, hit subscribe. I'd really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time as we start setting up for Game Week 36 in what will be, incredibly, my 200th YouTube video.